So April 26th is Earth Day, and um, wanted to do a video specifically, bringing attention to climate change. Of course, comes up, and you have a lot of those individuals out there that still deny climate change and um, the human effects on this planet. So when you when we study climate change, we know that 2,500 scientists couldn't be just making this up. And then I'm going to get to I'll get to my points. There's like approximately 10 points that I wanted to make as far as climate change and what's, what could be done about it. Specifically on my list, I had 10 items there. So I'll go one by one and try to clarify or try to explain what it is that my opinion is with regards to these 10 items that I picked. And naturally, I'm not a scientist, but I can tell you, have spoken to plenty of scientists in the past from many different parts of the world, and whenever climate change came up, I would always ask them, do you feel that human beings have a real effect on climate change? And I've never really had a single individual who was a scientist that ever said to me that, human beings have no effect on it, this is something else. The few scientists that I have spoken to in my lifetime, 100% of them have mentioned to me and emphasized the point that human beings have a tremendous effect on the planet, and in this case specifically, the warming of the planet. So we know that majority of the scientists are stating that, and there have been 1,000 books written on it. There is different events that one can go to and listen to different scientists. So we know it's real. The temperature climbing in the on the planet is real, be it as 1.5 degree or centigrade, or if it's it might even be higher than that. But they have ways of measuring it. We have plenty of science and data now that can give us a clue as to where the trends are heading, say in 20, 30, 50 years out. So the alarm bells are already ringing. We know that something has to be done. The mindset has to change collectively in order for the planet to rejuvenate itself to the point where it doesn't collapse completely as far as natural events like hurricanes and tornadoes and typhoons and tsunamis and all sorts of events that are being witnessed right now by the planet. So the very first thing I have on my list is naturally oil and gas, right? So fossil fuels were, and I'm going to stick to philosophical points on these 10 items that I picked for Earth Day. And I'm not going to throw a whole bunch of data because from my analysis, I felt like I needed to stick to mostly philosophical points of view. That way, the average person listening can understand that we have a dilemma on the planet, and it is an individual lifestyle that would make a difference. So um, um, it begins with the individual. That is my very first point. So let's go to the very first item that I picked, which is naturally oil and gas, fossil fuels. Um, we know that fossil fuels have contributed in the past and are doing so currently and will continue to do so unless we were to pick alternative means as far as solar, wind, um, biofuels, anything else anything we could replace fossil fuels with. Because the carbon emissions naturally that are being emitted due to the fossil fuels are immense and are collectively causing this, are contributing to it. They're not the singular source there, but they are contributing to it. And they're, let's just say, they're a huge factor. So oil and gas is something that is very much on top of my list there as number one. Then I have the second point would be, well, let me go back to the fossil fuels and oil and gas. EVs are coming up. Tesla definitely contributing quite a bit in this nation, and I know there's other Ford, GM, everyone else is trying to come up with their own version of EVs, electric vehicles. So this is basically a drop in a bucket right now. It is going to have an effect within, say, 20 to 30 years time, but currently it is just a very, it's a drop in a bucket. It's not really huge because they're not being able to produce too many, and we haven't gotten to that mindset yet, even though there are states that are increasing their emission standards and realizing that they're going to need to do something individually. Like California is one of them. There's some other states doing that. New York, Florida. There's other states that are also doing it quietly, but there needs to be a lot more done on the EV side. So how do we create this mindset of getting away from vehicles that are destroying our planet? We just have to educate people. That's number one. And education, not just is something that begins at a younger age rather than someone. When I say younger, I mean into the teens. So if we begin to educate at say a 10th or 11th grade, and I'll get to this point again later on in the video, but this is my point on that. Begin the education a lot earlier in someone's life. That way they understand the ramifications of fossil fuels and what is going on and things of that sort. So the second thing on my list, the second item on my list is deforestation. So if one thinks that deforestation does not have any bearing on the planet's warming, basically is brain dead. So the plants, trees have an ability to store carbons and carbon dioxide. And when you cut down the very lungs of the planet, you're going to have some effects there as far as warming of the planet once again. So if people really look at it objectively and realize that yes, deforestation is contributing to our planet warming, and because when did we ever cut down that many trees in the past? So it is essential that individuals realize that cutting down a tree is not just cutting down a tree and getting paper goods out of it and other things that we use as far as um, uh, the trees are concerned. We really are hurting the planet every time we chop down a tree. So, and if the demand is not there, you wouldn't have these large multinational corporations going out there chopping up trees. So it's really a mindset. It's begins with the individual. It is not the multinationals are looking to make a profit. So when they see an avenue there, they're going to take it because they're looking to make a profit. So it's driven by profit. So if the mindsets change on an individual basis, so if a person is saying, well, let me give you an example. If it's singular individual, and that singular individual, you watching, says to tells themselves that, look, I'm not going to use that much paper anymore. I have decided on this, and changes their mindset as far as how much of paper goods they produce, what it is that they're producing that could cause a tree to cut down. I assure you, in the long run, 50 to even 30 to 50 years, it would make a huge difference in the problem of deforestation, which is also contributing to global warming. So it comes down to individuals. It doesn't. You can't blame the multinationals for trying to make a profit. That's what they're in business for. So if the consumer is not backing down, they're going to continue to chop down trees, is what my point is. So be mindful of that. This is what we need to understand collectively, that it's a mindset, collective mindset. So moving on to the third, we have a tremendous amount of waste that we create as human beings, approximately 9 billion people living on the planet. We know we are throwing a lot of things that we are using. We're consumers, and when I say we, I mean I include everyone in there, including myself, and try to be more conscious of what I consume, what I throw, whether I should reuse something more than once, twice or three times, so I can reduce the burden on the planet. It is once again, like the second item, deforestation. Waste is also a mindset. We are throwing things without the understanding that where this waste ends up. So once again, we need to have education at a younger age, starting into the teens, when the intellect is developing to a point, because they say by 26 we have the intellect's fully matured and developed at that point. So if we start education of climate change at say 9th or 10th grade and start to explain to the children of that age group that this is a huge problem in the out years, I assure you the mindset will change individually. So the waste is something that could be explained very easily. It is not a difficult thing to explain waste, and to create a mindset where an individual realizes that every time I throw something in the trash, where does that end up? And how long does this thing stay in its condition and contribute to the global warming or climate change? So individuals can be given a reason, and the explanations has to be very logical so the younger minds can understand it. It has to be simple in some ways so they can grasp the idea that um, throwing something away is not just throwing something. We're not throwing it out of the planet. We're literally throwing it back into the planet. So it is going to have an effect. And I can assure everyone that the younger generation will understand this. So moving on to the third, power plants. When we look at power plants and the amount of carbon emissions that are being generated by the power plants, it is real. You can just stand there and watch a chimney and a smokestack and see what it's doing. We know it is contributing to something. If someone does not believe, it's impossible to talk to a climate change denier anyhow. But we can actually continue to explain it to them, hoping that at some point one would understand that yes, when you are polluting the earth on this level, my ability to breathe is affected, and naturally this carbon footprint stays, gets into the environment and stays there and causes all sorts of havoc on the planet. So the power plants are extremely crucial to understanding climate change. And as I said, I'm not going to throw a whole lot of data there. I could have, but I said no, I would continue to keep this thing more on a philosophical level, so average person that's watching it can understand that there are consequences to individual actions. So my point on Earth Day is to get to the individual, speaking to any individual, whether there's 10 individuals watching this or a million. The point is we need to understand that our actions have consequences. So if we change our individual mindset, we are going to change the health of the planet collectively. I can assure you of that. We all need to live here. The future generations that are coming haven't even been born yet. Basically are relying on us to make sure that we leave the planet in a sustainable way for them, so they can come into this world in a decent condition where they're able to breathe, they're able to enjoy life and take care of things and raise their families and live a normal life rather than worrying about all the problems, the havoc that the planet is causing with regards to climate change. And then moving once again, my first point was oil and gas, but oil and gas drilling is my fifth point there. Drilling causes a tremendous amount of damage to this earth. So if one does not understand this, then I would advise you to go to a place where they're drilling for oil and visit this place and try to see, well, let me see what this drilling is about, or try to watch a video and see, does drilling, really oil drilling, oil and gas drilling, have an effect on the planet's nature in any way as far as global warming is concerned. And I can assure you, if you put yourself in an objective mind frame and look at it from that point of view, try not to use any information you have previously. Just watch the process of drilling for oil. So that is my advice to anyone that's watching. Watch a video, talk to someone, and figure out, really, is it really that dangerous for the planet to have all this oil and gas drilling all over the planet, and including the oceans. that are being polluted by oil spills and what have you, with the various components that are involved in drilling for oil in the ocean. So that was my fifth point. There's number six. Naturally, I'm going to something that's affiliated with oil and gas, which is transportation, right? The vehicles that are using fossil fuels are emitting a tremendous amount of carbon emissions there, and those carbon footprints are basically hanging around in the environment, being recycled back onto the planet, and causing all sorts of problems that people may not understand at this point, but science is telling them that the emissions get into the environment and stay there, and then they basically are poured back onto the earth via rain and cause diseases, cause all kinds of problems for human beings. So every time you fire up your car, you start your car, and that's my philosophical point on that. Every time you start your car, try to ask yourself, do I really need to take this trip? Could I take this trip and combine many different errands? And I'm not speaking of going to work. Naturally, you're going to work, you're going to work. Even then, going to work, take the shortest route. Figure out the best way to go from point A to point B. Second, and kind of very important, what kind of a vehicle am I using? Am I using a truck, or am I using a gas guzzler that's giving me 8 or 10 miles to the gallon? So it may be that you could afford it, and it's great and all that you have the finances to be able to fill up a tank that doesn't break your bank, and you basically are okay with it. You still need to consider these facts that here's what I'd like you to think. When you are starting your vehicle, you need to think very clearly about what your future generation, your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, and so on and so forth, would they be affected by this turn of the ignition? So think of it in those terms. Every time I start the vehicle, I try to think, okay, well, let me plan this thing out so I'm not burning fuel for no apparent reason. It's not about higher fuel cost either. People can afford. Even with $4 a gallon, we notice that people are driving around. So it's not a big deal. People drive around. They have plenty of money. In this, we are not a third world nation. There is plenty of wealth here for people to spend money on fuel and drive around all over creation. So it's not really that kind of an issue with us as far as United States is concerned, but other parts of the world, people need to take similar things in account. So think of it in those terms. What is it that I'm doing to my out generations every time I turn the ignition and start the vehicle? So that is my point on that. Everyone needs to consider basically trying to get into a hybrid or an EV. That way the footprint is a lot less. The carbon footprint is a lot less on the planet, your individual footprint. And then the next point, my seventh point, is basically dealing with consumerism. Consumerism is something that's very real, and we know that because we're all guilty of it. Whether some of us are consuming less than others, every human being living on the planet is consuming, and we are guilty to some extent. So we need to individually look at that and understand that me consuming all these variety of things that I'm consuming, could I lower my um, um, ways of consuming various different types of things in this world. And I'm not just picking on any particular group or individual or anything. This is basically due to the Earth Day. I try to do something philosophical rather than throw out a whole bunch of data and everything. Once again, consumerism begins at a younger age when the mindset, the intellect is developing, and our children have to understand that consuming things have an effect on the planet. Now, where do we begin this information? You have to begin providing this information on ninth or 10th grade level. And by the time the person graduates from high school and is admitted into college, into university or college or higher education, they have a clear understanding of what consumerism is about and what are the consequences of it. So if we don't educate, that person does not have a chance, and we can't blame people for acting ignorantly because we have never taken the time to educate them. So once again, philosophical point, educate, educate, educate. And it comes down to that individual. So if I was giving, say, mini lecture in a 10th grade class, and there was 30 students there, and out of those 30 students, 5 of them understood what my point was of consumerism. Each one of those 5 individuals will turn into 50, and those 50 individually will turn into another 50 each. So you see the consequences of education with regards to consumerism is extremely important. So once again, on Earth Day, we need to not just celebrate it on calendar and say it's Earth Day and talk about some issues there and then move on to the next day. This is something that on an individual basis could be explained to a specific age group that will turn around and become more conscious consumers. So once again, not picking on anyone. We're all consumers in the world. We're buying clothing, cars, products, things, everything you can think of under the sun, we're consuming. So by reducing the consumption, we individually could make a difference in the out years. But that has to be taught, as I said, at a younger age. So, and these habits we know last a lifetime. So something you teach at 10th grade, that person will remember in their golden years and have a clear understanding of what what the consumerism is about. And then my 8th point would be farming, and once again, not picking on farmers. Farming is essential. We have to eat. There is 9 billion people on the planet, and everyone has to eat. So farming is essential part of our human collective, but we could improve our farming by many, many folds and get into alternative style of farming and a more conscious farming, if I could use that term. Conscious meaning each farmer realizes that using certain pesticides, certain agriculture products um, not just pesticide but fertilizers, uh, there are consequences to this, and because that is going into the earth, and uh, when we're looking at what we're putting into the earth is extremely important, um, once again to the future of this planet, um, and it could be taught at a younger age as well. So it's not something that a generational farmer has to learn in their 20s and 30s and realize, okay, I need to be a little bit more understanding about what I'm putting into this earth. You have to start that at a younger age. So the farmers would have to talk to their future generation at a very younger age and create that consciousness that, look, what we put into this ground is extremely important to the well-being and welfare of this planet in the out years. So the future generations, their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, so on and so forth, would have a sustainable lifestyle, and would not be suffering from any sort of calamities on the planet because we are pouring certain things into the ground. Industrialization is number 9. Industrialization contributed quite a bit to the planet core temperature, and we understand this. We needed industrialization to take us into the future, and there is no denying that. We understand this, and we know we're responsible for the industries that are out there as a whole. We all, at some point, one time or another, supported industry. Either we work in it, around it, or we're buying a product that supports industry. So once again, no one person or one group or entity, in my opinion, is responsible. Human beings collectively are responsible for this. So this is something that has to be an individual mindset, even though it's industries that we're talking about. But individual understanding this at a younger age could mean a huge difference in the out years for the posterity. So we need to explain these things at certain age groups and start. I'm not saying start really early, but in my opinion, 9th or 10th grade is probably where I would start educating children about certain things as far as industry and what are the effects of it. Not demonizing anyone. Everyone on this planet is using something that supports industry or is needing industry to continue to exist in the way it does. So in order for, once again, philosophically, we need to understand that we're all part of the same planet. And the industry is part of us. So without demonizing industry, we need to understand our individual habits have to change in order for the industry to change and adapt and improvise. So the very last point would be the oceans, and naturally oceans, meaning what lives in the ocean, within the ocean, is what we are talking about. So fishing and overfishing, naturally, because we have 9 billion people on the planet, and we are overfishing and trying to feed everyone, because not everyone wants to eat certain kinds of proteins, and not everyone is consuming certain type of meat. So fish and seafood is something that's extremely important to the planet's welfare. So if we are individually, once again, conscious about this, eventually what would happen is the overfishing will just reduce on its own. It's amazing to see what one individual's power really is. Uh, One individual changing its mindset makes a huge difference, because that translates into 50 individuals. And uh, the fishing industry is no different. It's simply catering to the demands of the consumer. So if the consumer becomes conscious and realize that, look, over consuming seafood is not a sustainable thing for the out generations, I can assure you the overfishing will stop. So that was my number 10, uh, uh, the 10th point that I wanted to make. And it is extremely important, just like the remaining nine other items that I mentioned. So overfishing is simply you not the fault of those who are bringing the fish to the table. It is the individual that's consuming it once again and demanding that product as far as that's coming from the oceans. So once again, changing the individual mindset with regards to overfishing starts with the individual first. So let me summarize everything I just said. The 10 points that I made, starting with oil and gas, all the way down to overfishing. It comes down to education. And yes, we are extremely conscious of what we're educating our children with. But when you look at climate change, and this is a key point that I wanted to make on Earth Day today, is that with regards to climate change, we do not have anything that's classified as a course in, say, 9th or 10th grade. We could and we should and we must at some point mandate this on a policy level, where our younger generations who are still at the stage of having their intellects being developed, we need to have a course that teaches climate change. So call it Climate Change 101, call it Global Warming 101, or call it anything else. But what we need to do is have a course dedicated to climate change, so the future of the planet would basically be benefited from that particular course. So regardless of what we call it, we need to have climate change, global warming, in a subject format that makes it mandatory for all students to learn. Like we learn math, we learn sciences. We could learn a course, our younger generation could learn a course that says climate warming, climate change, global warming. Regardless of how we label it, the education there is extremely important to the out years and to the out generations. And that was my final point and my summary on what I wanted to convey on today, which is April 22nd, the Earth Day.